Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Podcast Daily, and congratulations. You've made it to Freaky Friday. That's Berm. I'm Austin Ward. And not only that, this is the last weekend you have to go through before Big Ten Media Days. And then the weekend after that, there's going to be Ohio State training camp. So, Berm, it's like the season is here.
Yeah, we've talked about it in jest a few times, but it feels like one of the longer off seasons I can remember in the time I've been covering the team. And I don't know if it's because like there's just been no bad news and nothing to like make things, that you had to hyper focus in on during the summer or whatever. But I'm glad football is back soon. I'm also like, man, I can't believe how like it's already August almost. And then you're like, my life is over for the next 5 months. So that part of it's unfortunate, but I guess we make the sacrifices we make.
Your life is over. You live for football season. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Yeah, but I mean, like the life where you can like not have to worry about football season all the time. It's nice. It's nice to like not be swarmed with things, but at the same time, it's like, man, okay, can we just get back for this purpose, for this show, especially because like how much stuff can we talk about?
Well, I scrolled around on some of the new improved legal gambling apps in Ohio to try and find some of those things to get us through. And so
this is a Freaky Friday. This is an official Freaky Friday without a mailbag. This is just us
no mailbag.
Riffing on what exactly we're riffing about, which I don't know what it is yet. So that's the fun part.
That's where I like to keep you on your toes. Yes, and it is more like a Bold Peas Freaky Friday than a mailbag Friday because there is no mail. I just went around looking at some of the gambling lines that I thought were interesting. And one problem that I ran into, like there are a few, for those of you who don't know, you may have seen these on social media if you follow anyone who covers Ohio State or college football in general. There are some gambling outlets that are much more active about sending out updated win totals, interesting matchup lines as soon as they come out. Week 12, week 13 gambling lines for games of rivalry interest. There's one outlet in particular that's very aggressive about doing that. One gambling outfit, I should say. And they sent out a list, Berm, with player props for quarterbacks across the country. But they did not have any for Ohio State, which I thought was a ridiculous cop-out.
Yeah, I mean, could they just put Ohio State quarterback or would they have to pick one? I don't know enough about how these things work on the back end, but could they have just said Ohio State quarterback and gone with that?
Probably not, because I mean they could have done the combined position perhaps, but like if you were trying to take a specific individual, I don't think they could set you up to take, well, whoever wins the starter, that will automatically become your wager. I think that would be too challenging and probably not legal. But there are Heisman odds for both Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, so it's not like people are ruling out the possibility.
Like, they could have leaned into one, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and they could have done both. They could have made them the exact same passing totals because what they have is like passing yardage. A lot of them for Caleb Williams and Drake May. There's going to be over or under 3,500 passing yards. 30 touchdowns. Like Ohio State's average production, throwing out the ridiculousness from Dwayne Haskins, they could have just taken that and put those odds for both Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. If you're trying to engage one of the largest fan bases in the country, you probably would want to do that. But I'm not an expert.
Or maybe they engaged one of the largest fan bases in the country by not putting an Ohio State quarterback on there in order to draw the ire of the fan base that is known for not letting anything slip past them and then hyper reacting.
They got me. They got me on that one.
Real genius.
But so I couldn't get into that. We could make them up, and maybe at the end of the show we will. But they were both listed in the Heisman, and you've already made a Heisman wager. Do you want to tell people what that is?
I bet that Quinn Ewers will win the Heisman Trophy. I just think he's going to have a monster year at Texas, and I mean, just because he's not at Ohio State, I've never changed my opinion that his arm talent alone makes him one of the more special quarterbacks in the country. If he is as bought in as is coming from Austin, from not you, Austin, but Austin, Texas, as far as what we hear from people about how he's recommitted himself to the game and to working on being physically more ready for the rigors of college football. If he's able to do those things, their offense, they have some very talented wide receivers. They're going to throw the ball a lot more without having Bijan Robinson and the other running back who got drafted, whose name is escaping me. I apologize. They're going to
don't cover Texas.
They're going to chuck the ball around the yard. That's for sure.
Ooh.
And I think Quinn's going to have, if he can beat Alabama, which I know is a big if they can beat Alabama.
Come on, Berm.
If they were very close to beating Alabama. Texas was very close to beating Alabama a year ago. He doesn't have to have 400 yards in that game. They just have to win it. If he can help lead them to a win against Alabama, which this is expected to be one of the down teams for Nick Saban's time at Alabama. I think the schedule sets up nicely for him to put up some huge numbers, and people will be interested in what Quinn Ewers does. So I also bet you that he's going to be a first-round pick next year. So I'm looking to cash in doubly on Quinn because I still believe in his talent is better than 99% of the quarterbacks in the country.
What I like is that when you get ideas like that in your brain, you don't even check what the actual odds are. So you took appreciably worse odds on Quinn Ewers winning the Heisman against me than what you actually could have got just by opening your phone. And I love it because it's more important to you, I think, to have bragging rights.
I did make that an actual wager on the DraftKings app, as to try to cash in. I think I put in a wager at him at plus 1,600. So, and that's gone down. I think it's now like plus 1,100 or something like that. So I like where I sit with that.
All right. So let's just pretend that you don't have a Quinn Ewers bet. The odds for the Ohio State players, Marvin Harrison has the best Heisman odds currently at plus 2,000. Kyle McCord checks in just behind him at plus 2,200. Travion Henderson is plus 3,000. And then Devin Brown, kind of way back there in the long shots, or at least listed. If you're on the list, that doesn't make you a long shot because there are 1,000 other players that aren't. But Devin Brown got plus 6,000 odds. Would any of those tickle your fancy beyond Quinn Ewers?
No. And as good as Marvin Harrison is, and we've talked so much about how he's not even a human being, one wide receiver has won the Heisman in the last 30 years. So I don't know that it's a smart bet to put. And I get, what was he, plus 2,000? Is that what it was?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, it may be worth it at plus 2,000 because everyone knows that the award is going to go to a quarterback. So unless Marvin does what Marvin does and puts up crazy highlight reel catches and big numbers, but he does that splitting with the quarterbacks, I think maybe there's a shot if that's the case. If something happened at Ohio State where Kyle and Devin had to split a lot of reps and it wasn't one quarterback accruing all the stats that Marvin is getting, then I think you could see that conversation. But if Marvin Harrison has 100 catches and 1,800 yards and 15 touchdowns, and one quarterback is doing that for Ohio State, that means that quarterback is probably throwing the ball for 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns and has, Emeka Ibuka probably has 75 or 80 catches with another 1,000 yards. Like, I think people will always just give it to the quarterback. So I'd take Kyle McCord at plus 2,000 probably more than I would be Marvin Harrison if I were. I'm not a betting expert, as we've established on this show, but I mean, Marvin at plus 2,000 is a good value, I guess, because he is the second best player in college football, and maybe he's the best non-quarterback player in college football. So people are going to talk about him. He's going to be a highlight reel every week. But come on, Tim Brown won the Heisman in 1989, and Rocket Ishmael, he didn't win the Heisman. He was up there, one of those guys. But I mean, Devontae Smith in 2020 is the last one since the late 80s, so it's not common.
Not very common at all. And I think that's actually why I believe that there's currently good value on Kyle McCord, because I think there's probably a fair amount of people waiting to see who officially gets named the starter for Ohio State in August. And as has been documented pretty well throughout our coverage back in spring, I think that it's close to inevitable that Kyle McCord will be the starting quarterback for Ohio State against Indiana. So I think maybe plus 2,200 is likely to drop by this time next month or earlier, if depending on whenever Ryan Day makes this decision, which we don't know when or if that would be before the Indiana game. But to follow up on your point, like Kyle McCord's numbers, if they were good enough to help Marvin win the Heisman, they would most likely surpass that, adding in all the other touchdowns that would go to Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming, Kate Stover, on down the list. And I think that there's a decent chance that Kyle McCord, not to read too much into spring practices again, but there was a lot of concerted effort to have him carrying the football and finish off some drives in the red zone with his legs. I think he may be able to supplement his numbers there, not in terms of rushing yards, but rushing touchdowns that make him look pretty attractive as a candidate. So amongst that list,
Caleb Williams doesn't have a lot of rushing yards. He just runs around like a crazy person and finds a way to make plays. Like, that's where I think Kyle, like, if you put him head to head against Caleb Williams, I don't think it's a fair battle, because Caleb Williams' highlight reel is going to draw Heisman attention, where I think Drake May, Quinn Ewers, Kyle is much more in that lane, I think, than the human highlight reel that is Caleb Williams. But yeah, plus 22 is pretty good for the Ohio State quarterback right now, I'd imagine. I agree with you.
Yeah, I don't think it'll stay there for long. Okay, so the others got kind of wild, and it comes down to a lot of uncertainty, I think, between those experts who are making the line about what to do with Ohio State and Michigan in November, because there's pretty much every line, and all the ones I'm going to throw them out to you in a second here, Berm, they all suggest Ohio State is a better national title contender. They have slightly better odds to win the Big Ten. They have better odds to win the Big Ten East, but Michigan has better odds to have a perfect regular season. But I still, so it's a interesting situation they've got, because you can almost find odds to get whatever outcome you want between Ohio State and Michigan for the end of the season. But let's start with the simpler one, which is an over or under, which is basically even money of 10.5 wins, Berm.
This is the most challenging Ohio State schedule in a number of years for a number of reasons. Obviously, a lot of road games. Penn State at home, but Penn State's pretty darn good. At Notre Dame, at Wisconsin, at Michigan. There are going to be games that test this Ohio State team early and often this season. I actually think like Western Kentucky is going to score 40 points against Ohio State because of their offense, and people are going to freak out. Ohio State will score maybe 80, but like I can see a situation where Western Kentucky's offense is so explosive and different than anyone you face that they're going to score a lot of points. People will freak out. People will see these things and wonder. I'm going to say over on the 10.5 wins. I think Ohio State, I have a tough time seeing them getting through this regular season unscathed. Let's just say that. I'm not going to deep dive into which game I think they could stumble on right now, because I think in some ways losing at Wisconsin makes it less likely that they lose at Michigan. So, I mean, there's all the way that these things work out, but I'm still going to say over. I don't see them losing 2 regular season games.
Yeah, I thought that they might get sneaky, these sports books, and put the over-under line at 11 to capitalize on everyone trying to bet one way or the other, and then reaping the benefits of both bets by winning there in the middle, because I think Ohio State is more likely than not to go 11-1 in the regular season. I am not ready to sit here and say which one of those is going to be a loss at this point, because as you said, it could be any number of candidates. But once that happens, I find it unlikely that would duplicate itself with a second regular season loss. I don't believe that that's going to happen for this team. And as we've witnessed in the past, they can lose once, and that could be outside the league to Notre Dame, or it could potentially even be in the last week of the regular season and still get into the college football playoff and be a national champion after that. I don't think they're going to lose twice. I think over is the play here. And I think that some of this is built in. You don't usually see maybe the third best team, which is what Ohio State has to win a national championship, the third best odds at plus 650, having an over-under win total that suggests they expect them to lose at some point. That's kind of odd to me, but I think it also makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough schedule. They're going to go into Ann Arbor as the underdog at the end of November, unless Michigan comes out of the gate and just completely stumbles and doesn't look like the team they've been the last 2 years. They're going to be the favorite in that game in late November. So the odds makers are clearly looking at that one and saying, well, let's see what happened a year ago, and the Buckeyes still make the playoff. And that was an anomaly. That took a lot of things to happen for the Buckeyes to get into the playoff with the regular season loss to Michigan. I don't think that they will get that sort of break again. So to me, if you lose to Michigan, I think they are out of the playoff this year, regardless. So that's just how I'm viewing it. I think you can more afford to lose in the beginning of the year or a random night game at Camp Randall than you can to lose in that pivotal game, because that pivotal game will keep you out of the Big Ten championship game. And I don't think that after what the national media, basically the outcry about giving Ohio State breaks to get them in the playoff a year ago, even though they acquitted themselves perfectly fine and proved that they belong there, I don't think that people will let that happen again so easily, especially because I really believe the Oklahoma-Texas winner is going to get into the playoff this year as a way to bump up the SEC heading into next year. And I believe that USC has an opportunity to run the table out west. And if they do that, then they're going to get in. Now they're easily a team that can stumble at any step along the way as they normally do. But I bet that, I'd be shocked if I'd not be shocked if they were in the playoff contention in that last weekend of the year, like they were last year.
I thought maybe we were in Jay-Z's conspiracy corner for a second there with the bump for OU Texas a year out. What a wild turn that took. I wasn't expecting that. I should have.
Wrong? You think it's wrong? If one of those teams goes 12-1 and wins the Big 12, you think they're gonna? I mean, the SEC, like the pre-SEC love, will be hard for people to ignore.
I mean, not if they still played a Big 12 schedule and not an SEC schedule.
But we'll see. I mean, if Texas would have won, if one of those teams would have finished 12-1 last year, they would have got in. Is the way I view it. So I think that now, if they did that this year and have the additional ooh la la of the SEC coming, so that ESPN can talk about how there's actually 3 SEC teams in the playoffs this year, that's what they would do.
Okay. I don't think the SEC is getting multiple teams in this year. The Big 12, the Big 10, I believe, is much more likely with Ohio State and Michigan. But I think we'll have plenty of time to talk about that in November. If you wanted to go beyond the over/under of 10.5 wins for Ohio State, a perfect season is currently plus 340, is what I saw. No is a massive favorite at minus 425. So you can get 3.5. What is that? Yeah,
that makes no sense. The national. So there are better odds on them
for the regular season.
Okay,
for the regular season. Yeah, sorry, I should have clarified. You got
340 in the regular season
to go 12-0.
Yeah, I mean, what were the odds on the 10.5 over under?
That was just a even money proposition.
Yeah, I mean, the value is certainly to take the undefeated regular season. I mean, that's certainly where the value would be if you're doing that.
Yeah, that's pretty appealing for somebody with Ohio State's upside. All right, so these go hand in hand, obviously. It is not a line for Ohio State and Michigan in Ann Arbor, but it might as well be. The slight division favorite to win the East is Ohio State at plus 110. They have the best odds in the East. Michigan is second at plus 125. Pretty narrow. And then beyond that, they have the exact same odds to win the Big Ten, which makes sense because whichever one does emerge is quite obviously going to beat the West champion. Do you want to place a wager on who's going to win the East? Would you put any units on Ohio State winning the East at plus 110 right now? Or would you rather just wait and get actual odds on the matchup in November?
I would probably just wait if I were in that position to see what these teams look like when you have Michigan's offense, what Blake Corum's role is, how they balance him and Donovan Edwards, if they have the J.J. McCarthy that played against Ohio State last year, or the J.J. McCarthy that played the previous 5 weeks to that game. If I was forced to take one of those now, I'd take Michigan at plus 125. They're the favorite in that game. It's at home. They clearly have the momentum against Ohio State right now on the field, so I would probably just take that bet. But, I think the hard part is if you look at Michigan's schedule, I don't see them losing anywhere else. And whereas with Ohio State's schedule, because it's so tough, so much tougher than normal, I should say, because of the number of road games. I would think Michigan still should have better odds to win the odds should be in Michigan's favor to win the Big Ten East.
Yeah, I think that's the push.
I just don't see him stumbling somewhere else.
Right. I think that's the push and pull that's going on with the odds makers in the sports book, is because they believe Ohio State is the more talented team, but Michigan's schedule favors them, and the location of the matchup head to head works in their favor as well. So like, you could tell that they don't want to expose themselves too much to Ohio State because they truly believe they're one of the 3 best national title contenders. I was a little bit surprised that Alabama was second, to be honest, but I wonder if the odds for Ohio State are always, so difficult. They play massive spreads. We talked about that a lot last year. And even in the opener, you have to go out and cover 28.5. I think it is right now, on the road against a Big Ten opponent with 3 new starting offensive linemen and a new quarterback. Like, that's kind of crazy that you have if you are wagering on Ohio State, which not every person who is an Ohio State fan does, or not everyone who's listening to the show cares about gambling odds. That's fine. I apologize if you didn't want us to only talk about that today, but and then if you want to bet on futures on your team and to win their division is basically an even money bet. If you don't have any, hey, we're going to go prove somebody wrong, and I'm going to win, $500 by putting 100 on my team in, Indiana to win the East. Like, it's probably longer than that. I did not look at Indiana's odds, but like, that's some of the fun that I think Ohio State fans probably don't ever get to enjoy.
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, you see Alabama there, and you look at everything they lost from last season to now. The quarterback situation is completely unsettled. Tyler Buckner is the presumptive starter, I guess, over Jalen Milroe, who can't throw the football. Georgia, obviously, yeah, I mean, that seems like a bad thing for quarterback. We've spent so much time this offseason talking about the Ohio State quarterback situation and how they're going into this year with unproven quarterback. Like, so's Georgia, so's Alabama, so's Clemson. Like, those schools are not being viewed through the same, like, well, if it's all about quarterback play, like if you had to put, if we're talking gambling odds, if you had to put money down on which quarterback to have the better season between Ohio State's quarterback, Georgia's quarterback, and Alabama's quarterback, how the hell would you not pick Ohio State's quarterback? So if you truly believe that the rest of the Ohio State roster is good enough to make them the top 3 choice in the national title odds, then you would, I think, want to give them some benefit of the doubt when it comes to the quarterback play over Georgia and over Alabama, who have guys with even, more question marks. Georgia doesn't have the wide receivers that Ohio State does. Alabama doesn't have the quarterback room from the recruiting standpoint that Ohio State does. Georgia does with some of their young guys, with Carson Beck, with the Gunnar Stockton and other guys that they've got in their room. Like, they've got a couple 5-stars trying to line up and play just like Ohio State does, where Bama's relying on a quarterback from Notre Dame who was pretty much benched most of the year last year, and a quarterback in Jalen Milroe who they acknowledge like is essentially a running back. So unless Alabama under Tommy Rees is completely changing their offense and has all of a sudden wide receivers who are comparable to Ohio State's, I don't know where the love for them comes, knowing what they lost on their defense and everything else. But I mean, I know Nick Saban, so you always you just go, well, it's Saban, so you let it go.
Yeah. I think you're kind of underselling one key detail in there for Alabama, which is part of the surprise for me. Tommy Rees was nowhere near their first choice. No offensive coordinator seemed to want that job because of the expectation that Nick Saban will soon be no longer coaching. It's hard to believe. I was going to say departing, but that's not true because we know he's a vampire and he's going to live forever. I don't want to, change that around. He's clearly got some Tom Cruise in him in that regard. But Tommy Rees, and running that offense and organizing it and whatever, what has he done to earn that position with a national title contender? I don't know. It doesn't matter. It does help Ohio State's odds to win the national championship if you are so inclined to pursue them. You have plenty of time still to think. The season is a month and a half away, but Big Ten Media Days is next week and the start of training camp is after that. So the Podcast Daily is extremely excited for that coverage that we have coming your way, picking up again on Monday. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. That's Berm. I'm Austin. We'll talk to you then.